Testing, hope you can hear me. Hi everyone, my name is Mason and I work for Comet Backup here in New Zealand. Welcome along to the Ananke release webinar. I'm here to talk for about half an hour about our latest software release, what we've been working on, and all the new and exciting changes from the last quarter. So I have been regularly running this webinar series, showcasing the latest and greatest new Comet features. Back in 2021, we ran these webinars every month, but at the start of this year, 2022, we switched to publishing a monthly blog post about what's new, and this info webinar series now runs once a quarter, related to the major quarterly software releases that we do. So if you count the whole webinar series, then this is episode 23. But regardless of what our schedule is, it's all on the webinar platform, and you can subscribe to notifications about when we go live. And so I'm coming to you live today. It's 9 a.m. here in New Zealand. And my talk today will be about 30 minutes, including some time for questions at the end. And so if you're watching this live on our webinar platform, there's a chat widget. You can click the button. It's sort of in the bottom right corner of the screen. There's chat and questions. And if you click that button to pop it open, if you have any questions as we go, just write them in and I'll do my best to answer them at the end. So about 30 minutes, maybe a bit less. Everyone's busy. I'll keep it short otherwise. Hope you've got a coffee. And I'll just press on with things. So as you've seen from the title, today we're talking about Comet 22.11 Ananke, latest and greatest software release. So the 22.11 version number is the year and the month. So we release new Comet versions every week under the Voyager release track. And then every quarter, 4 times a year, we take all of that regular Voyager development and roll it up into these quarterly milestone releases, and that's your new fixed point to build on, offer to your customers, and we'll support it with patches and in the tickets. And another quarter's flown by, and today I'm going to recap all the new things that you can expect when upgrading to Ananke. First of all, some quick space facts. So what you're seeing in the picture, this is Ananke. It's one of the moons of Jupiter. So our Voyager releases, our very first one was Mercury. We started naming them Mercury in the inner solar system a few years ago now. We've been slowly moving outwards to the outer planets and moons. And after a few years of that, we reached Jupiter. And Jupiter's got 80 moons. And so we've been using names from there for a while. We're not going to run out of names anytime soon. And as for Ananke, it's the largest moon of what's called the Ananke group, which is a set of 7 of these moons of Jupiter. They've all got similar orbits, and that makes scientists think they've got a common origin. And the moon is named after, there's an ancient Greek mythological goddess of sort of inevitability. So enough about the name. That's where the name comes from. Enough about the name. What about the features? So we've counted 12 features and 20 enhancements this quarter for Ananke. Now the full changelogs are available on our website in the release notes section. And today I'm going to walk you through some of the main ones. Starting off with, we've put a new coat of paint on the Comet Backup desktop app. So a picture says 1,000 words. And I'm just going to run through some of the sections that are new here on this desktop interface. So the desktop app now shows you a summary of your protected items, storage vaults, and recent job history at a single glance. And it took a while to get the design right, and we're very happy to have struck a balance between, information density, visual identity, and still having efficient performance because these charts are using a pretty optimized renderer. And the dashboard screen is divided into 5 main areas. So the storage vaults chart at the top left, it shows up to 3 storage vaults, and if the storage vault has a quota, you can see the segment is colored slightly differently based on the partial usage of the quota. And if you've got more than 3 storage vaults, doesn't happen that often, does happen. The 3 are chosen for display based on, what's the most interesting ones to show. Do they have a quota? Are they very big? Have they been recently used? And further details about your storage vaults are, of course, remain available on the settings tab. This chart here, the currently protecting chart, shows a breakdown of your protected item size across this device and other devices. And if your Comet user account has got a limit on the number of devices, you'll be able to see it here. And if you've got a limit on the total protected item size, that will be reflected in this circle. The storage vault size chart at the lower left looks at the past 10 days worth of job history to build up sort of a visualization of how your storage vaults have grown or shrunk in that time. And Comet measures the size of a storage vault during backup operations. So this chart is most effective if you've had recent backup jobs. And once again, just for space constraints, we're showing a maximum of 3 storage vaults here. And as long as the necessary data points are available, the same choices and colors will be used as this chart up here, just to make it look more consistent. And of course, the transfer chart in the lower right looks at the same time period, 10 days worth of job history, shows the upload and download size for your jobs. And these figures correspond to the uploaded and downloaded job report columns. And at a technical level, we're calling them uploaded and downloaded. What it really reflects is the transfer to and transfer from the storage vault. And note that this means that you can see an upload and download size for a local path storage vault. That's not really correct. And if your protected item type pulls data over the network, such as say you're pulling a remote MySQL server or an Office 365 tenant, that's not necessarily included in the chart. And the last section of this dashboard is the news widget at the bottom. So we've got this news feature in Comet Server where you can immediately push a sort of bulletin message and have it show up in everyone's apps. And it's useful for contact details or notices of recent service changes or promotional messages. Any news message you create in Comet Server is shown instantly in the desktop app via the live connection. And if you've got no news entries, in this bottom section is hidden entirely. So it's a quick run through of the new dashboard screen inside the Comet Backup desktop app. But that's not all. We've made many more smaller improvements to the desktop app this quarter, and I've grouped them all into one slide. So first of all, when creating a new storage vault, using the custom option, the Comet Backup desktop app now shows new storage vaults in a wizard. And this brings the behavior in line with creating new protected items in the Comet Backup desktop app. And so we use a wizard for the initial creation to help you guide through the process. But after that initial creation, a tab dialog is used for quickly jumping to any setting. We've also applied a bit of a cosmetic overhaul to the search dialog in the Comet Backup desktop app to also use a wizard. And that, in this case, it's about having easier back and forward navigation if you want to go back and change your search snapshots. So that's much easier now that the search dialog is a wizard. Another one for the restore dialog. It's now possible to resize this column here. And the width calculation for these columns was a little bit complicated, and we weren't really allowing people to resize this one. But we've figured out a way to make that work, and now you can resize the columns. Job reports. So the job reports, several things happened here. First of all, simply bringing up the job report is faster and simpler. The view log button is now more responsive when that button is first shown. Very long job report lines now have better word wrapping behavior. This is a pretty extreme example of word wrapping. Particularly on Mac OS with Retina displays, there were some issues with word wrapping, and that's all now resolved. And very long job reports will now load much, much more quickly. So performance improvements for viewing very large job reports in the desktop app. Last bullet point on the slide, something a little bit interesting. It's now possible to right-click a protected item to duplicate it. Now, it's long been possible to copy and paste a protected item inside the Comet Server web interface, and you can use that to duplicate a protected item, but that was restricted to the web interface, and so now you can duplicate from the desktop app. It might not be clear immediately why you might want to do this, but actually this is a convenience feature for users of the Microsoft SQL Server, Office 365, and Hyper-V protected item types, which can in some cases benefit from having multiple protected items with slightly different settings. And so by duplicating an existing protected item and then making minor changes, it can be much faster to configure these from the Comet Backup desktop app. Next thing to talk about, streaming SQL restores. So Comet supports backing up MySQL and Microsoft SQL Server using dedicated special protected item types. And we've had these protected item types for a long time. They were actually both included with the very first beta versions of Comet. And they work by streaming the database dump directly from the database into our chunking deduplication engine. There's no requirement to dump a temporary file and then back up the temporary file. No, it can go directly. Which is simpler, faster, and it works even if you're low on disk space. So overall, a very cool idea. We didn't really have the same support on the restore side. So at restore time, you would go to restore data to a temporary file, and then you would have to import it into MySQL using a pipe, or import it into Microsoft SQL Server using the SQL Server Management Studio, the SSMS. And that's fine, it works, and Comet's done its job. It's got your database back, and then from here on, you use the standard database tool to finish up the restore. It's not so bad, but hey, we can do better. And so in 22.11 Ananke, we now support direct streaming restore of MySQL and Microsoft SQL Server backups from the storage vault straight back to your database server. And it doesn't matter if your storage vault is on S3 or local path or an FTP server. This restore is a direct pipeline with no temporary copies and no spool space required. So let's start out with what it looks like for MySQL. You just click through the restore wizard like normal, and on the very last screen you choose where you want to restore it to. And so this you can choose from this top drop down. One option is to restore the database dump as a file like the old ways, or there's a new option here to stream it into a MySQL server. And this feature is also available from the web interface. And so if you choose to stream the database restore back to a MySQL server, you can see all the MySQL connection settings here, same connection settings as if you are configuring the backup for it. And in fact, all the settings will be pre-configured from your protected item configuration if it's available, or you can fill in details for any custom MySQL server, hit restore, and Comet will stream that restore to your MySQL database. Just like that. And the version for Microsoft SQL Server works just the same, only it has a few more settings. You can see there's no tabs here, I think is one key difference. The MySQL one's got most of the settings split into tabs, so it looks a little bit slimmer. Microsoft SQL Server a little bit busier. And there's one particular setting here that I want to talk about, this last restore option setting for Microsoft SQL Server. You see, the thing about SQL Server backups with Comet is Comet has its own deduplication engine that can take any data and turn it into something that is incremental forever. So if you just take full backups from your SQL Server, then Comet intelligently deduplicates them, stores only the changes, incremental forever. You've got a full backup ready to go and ready to restore. So just taking full backups from SQL Server, it's our normal recommendation. It's win-win. However, SQL Server can be a complicated product. It's got a lot of features for very large servers, highly loaded servers, point-in-time log recovery, and Comet is aware of all of that and lets you configure it, although you're somewhat on your own. So instead of just taking full backups from your SQL Server, if your SQL Server is heavily loaded, then you may like to switch the recovery model from simple to full, start doing full backups plus differential plus log backups from your SQL Server. It's a bit more steps to manage, but it's not so bad. Specifically talking about this new streaming restore feature, it does mean the restore process can be more complicated, and you have to do a sort of layered restore where you restore your full backup and then restore your log backup on top of that. And SQL Server actually has to be told that you're doing a layered recovery. And so in this case, you first restore your SQL full backup with the I want to keep restoring additional files option. And then after that, restore your differential log files with the this is all I want to restore option. And that's how you can perform this layered, advanced layered SQL Server recovery with this new feature. So enough about restores. Comet 22.11 Ananke now includes a native Apple Silicon version of Comet Backup for macOS. So this will improve efficiency when running on recent Apple computers with the M1 and M2 chips. It's just another download option. Click the button and it downloads and installs just like usual, as long as you've got a suitable machine. Now, there's a few interesting things to note because, of course, the M1 machines have been out for a little while now, and Comet has actually just installed and worked fine on them this whole time. So what's the big deal? It means your existing macOS users will, so far, be running the current x86 version of Comet Backup for macOS on their M1 or M2 hardware under Rosetta emulation. So Apple managed to pull off this transition of their fundamental CPU architecture. And there are a few things that help them achieve that. One is they're a $1 trillion company. And aside from that, the new CPU is genuinely faster, and it comes with an excellent emulator for old x86 apps. And because the new CPU is sufficiently faster, it can run the emulator with good performance. So the x86 version of Comet does run very well under Apple's high-performance Rosetta emulation layer that's included with macOS. So it works just the same. In addition, the backup job speed is usually limited by network speed or disk I/O, not CPU speed. So running under emulation doesn't actually significantly impact the backup job overall runtime. So the overall backup speed is similar. However, the native version for Apple Silicon, obviously it's better. It'll be more CPU and battery efficient and so on. So after upgrading to the native Apple Silicon version, there will be no visible difference to the end user except for a snappier and longer lasting computer. There is one last thing to note about how remote upgrades work for the Apple Silicon version. Now, bit of a diagram here, I'll talk you through it. When an existing macOS user running an older version of Comet, they've got the x86 version running under emulation, and if you push a bulk upgrade campaign to upgrade their installed Comet backup app, their old installed client, it's an older version, it's not aware that we just launched this Apple Silicon version. And so first of all, it will upgrade to the 22.11 x86 version still under emulation. But this version, the 22.11, we've got some very special code that can detect that it's running under Rosetta emulation. And if it detects that, oh, I'm running the x86 version, but there's Rosetta, this is an M1 CPU, then the next time it does a software upgrade, it will upgrade to the native M1 version instead of the x86 version. So in summary, 2 upgrade cycles might be required for all macOS users to receive the full sort of performance and efficiency benefits of this change. Migrating users between tenants. So this is a quick one, just a short backstory. In Comet Server, the tenants feature allows you to create a private, isolated zone of user accounts, and the idea is that you'd use it for maybe resellers or sub-brands that have got their own logos and their own URLs. And the top-level administrator, you guys are the top-level administrator, you get visibility over all tenant users. And so this has been in Comet Server for a while, self-hosted Comet Server. And what is new in 22.11 Ananke is that it's now possible to migrate a user account between tenants. So to do so, you click the Transfer User option from the Actions menu on the user account page. Just like that, you get one prompt to pick the target tenant to move the user into, one more pop-up to confirm your changes. Just like that, the user is moved, including all of their job history and everything. There's one difficulty with this feature, which is that when you log into the Comet Backup desktop app, the login is directed to the Comet Server auth role URL. And the idea behind tenants in Comet Server is that each tenant generally has its own URL for the client to log into. When you use the Transfer User option, a signal will be sent to the online logged in devices to redirect them to log in again to the updated, the tenant specific URL. However, it's not really possible to send this message to an offline device. And if there are any offline devices, the Comet Server web interface will warn you when using this option because such devices will have to be manually logged in again to the new login URL, because you won't be able to log in with the previous tenant's URL. So you can make this change from the Comet Backup desktop app at the login screen, or by using the update login URL live action in advance. Next, I'm going to cover 2 integration partners, and the first is a company called Gradient MSP. So to start this story at the beginning, we have this wonderful feature requests page on our website where all of you, yes, you can go and post a feature request, read other people's requests and upvote them. And these votes do help guide our development priorities. We look at the system often. And when I looked on Friday, we had completed 138 of your requests. So we really do listen. Even if we don't get to them immediately, we are getting there. It's really cool to know that when you post a feature request, other MSPs out there are feeling the same way, and often we can collaborate, coming up with the best solution, which is a really positive interaction. And it's all pseudonyms as well. Everyone shows up as Comet user 1234. So if you're using the white labeling features of Comet and you don't want anyone to know who you are, then there's no concern about that. So anyways, in the feature voting system, we have a number of requests over the years to integrate with various PSA, that is Professional Services Automation Systems. And they come under various names such as ConnectWise, Synchro, Autotask. They're all slightly different, but the big idea behind these apps is that they are the day-to-day of running an IT shop. So these apps, they do your invoices, they get alerts from the customer's PCs about, I don't know, low disk space, antivirus alerts, and they put it all into a work queue for the technicians. So the whole range, from technical to billing, it's all glued together into a single pane of glass, which is a really compelling prospect. Of course, it works best only if everything is in there. So you definitely want your Comet alerts to be in there for your Comet usage amounts to translate into, PSA billing amounts, that kind of thing. But there are several of these products on the market, and we're thinking, okay, we want to do some of these integrations. Let's start with the biggest one, work our way down the list. As it turns out, something interesting happened because we met a nice company called Gradient MSP. So Gradient MSP are an external cloud service that allow you to sync user account data and backup job error alerts into many PSA systems, including ConnectWise, Synchro, Autotask, but also Kaseya, Pulseway, Halo PSA, and several others too. And so these guys, Gradient, they're a single glue between vendors like us, like Comet, and all of the PSA apps out there. So if Comet integrates with Gradient, then you get 6 or 7 or 8 PSA apps supported immediately. And better yet, they do not charge anything to connect one Comet server to one PSA. And you can check out our launch webinar on YouTube to see the full details. But basically, the process is, first of all, you sign up for Gradient. You choose your supported PSA from the list. It's a pretty long list. Then you go to the vendor page, click Comet. It gets an API code. You've got to copy the code between Gradient and Comet. And then click Sync Now. And that's kind of it. So just copy one API code back and forth between Comet and Gradient. And then once you've linked them all together in Gradient, you get this sort of drag and drop map where all of your PSA, so that's your ConnectWise or Autotask accounts on the left and your Comet customers on the right. Actually, in the screenshot, I think we're one level deeper. We are now assigning individual boosters. So this is disk image backup booster. We can assign it to a invoice, and it's pulled in this list of invoices from ConnectWise. And you sort of drag and drop between them to map them together, and that's kind of it, all hooked up. And so this gives you two key features. One is reconciliation between Comet usage and the invoices you're generating. So if someone's got 10 devices in Comet and you're only billing them for 5, you'll see that immediately. So Gradient's main screen is all about finding places you're underbilling and having sort of one click to feed that change through to change the invoices that you send out to customers. But it's not only about billing, you also get failed backup job alerts, get pushed into your PSA work queues. It's very configurable too. Gradient finds all of your Autotask boards and lets you send this new data feed to any particular board. Very cool system. If you've been waiting for us to integrate Comet and ConnectWise, Comet and Autotask, or any one of a dozen other apps out there, give this a try. It might get you most of the way there to what you want today for free. And so we're very pleased to have this new integration available in Comet 22.11 Ananke. Another integration that launched in 22.11 Ananke is Storage, a new partnership with Storage.io. And they're a decentralized cloud storage provider. When I last looked at Storage's marketing materials, they coordinate a network of over 13,000 storage nodes worldwide in almost every country. And so it can offer great low latency to nearby storage nodes. And because of the way the underlying, distributed storage is split between peers, it's not really a good fit for the standard API. And so Storage do offer an S3 compatible sort of gateway proxy server in a few regions. It has been possible to use Storage via this S3 compatible option, but in Comet 22.11 Ananke, it's now possible to connect directly to the Storage peer-to-peer network without involving that centralized S3 gateway. And so this allows for faster performance during download operations, lower latency without the centralized bottleneck, because the centralized S3 gateways are only run in a few regions, whereas Storage have got storage nodes, like I said, worldwide in almost every country. Now, it's not all roses. This means the Comet backup client is responsible for doing the peer-to-peer stuff, so there's more connections. Comet also has to do a kind of RAID type thing, erasure coding for redundancy throughout that peer-to-peer network, so the upload amount will be a bit higher, but maybe that's not a problem if it can improve performance and latency in other ways. Getting to the real reasons why you might want to use this. It's $4 a terabyte, and it has a very generous free tier of 150 gigabytes. Now, this is not a race to the bottom in this market, but some of these numbers are still very impressive. And there's a few ways to use storage with Comet. Storage is available as a separate type of storage vault location, so you can make a custom storage vault. Just go into storage and get an access key and paste it into the customer's storage vault settings. Or if you have a self-hosted Comet server with storage role, you can use storage as a cloud backend for your Comet server and have that data go from the customer to your Comet server to storage. So that extra hop, and that gives you Comet server storage role features such as automated provisioning, although the data is proxied through your Comet server. There is a third option, and really a key aspect of the storage integration. One of the things that we're most excited about in the method that we've been sort of overall promoting as a best practice for cloud storage is the ability to configure storage as a storage template provider. Now, storage templates let your Comet server automatically provision new private direct-to-cloud storage vaults for each of your customers with isolated credentials, including constellation support for automatically cleaning up storage buckets that are no longer used by any Comet user account. So here we're using a special storage API that creates new storage sub-level access keys for each individual user. You put your top-level keys in here, and Comet Server will automatically create sub-level keys for each user on demand. So very cool, and definitely a company to evaluate if you are shopping around for storage partners. Now, just a little bit of news about the Comet Server API. So as a whirlwind overview, there's this thing called the API, which lets you program your Comet server into doing anything at all: bulk creating accounts, manipulating users, starting backup and restores, changing settings, revoking devices, scouring through the job logs, anything at all. If you can do it with the Comet server web interface by clicking around, then you can do it from a program, because the Comet server web interface is what's called a single page app, or an SPA. And it's running a JavaScript application that just makes API calls to the Comet server using our same public API. So the possibilities are exactly the same. And we've had our API since day one of launching Comet. We have a very strong commitment to backwards compatibility. If you developed a Comet integration 5 years ago, it should keep working today without a single change. API is great. API is cool. We like it a lot. In order to make it easy to use, we've got pre-built libraries for some popular programming languages. But other than that, the API is just JSON over HTTP. So we've got many code samples available for other languages. So of course, you can still use the API from programming languages that do not yet have an official SDK. Which leads me to my announcement today of our latest new official SDK, this time for JavaScript and TypeScript. So this SDK is available on GitHub under the MIT license, and it's also available from the NPM package manager. And it includes all of the data structures, constants, and API definitions for complete coverage. It comes with built-in examples. It's built for TypeScript first. It's promise-based, so very async await friendly. The SDK also contains generated JS doc typings, ESM, and common JS bundles, so you can use this both from node.js and also from the browser. We've also created a sample app using the next.js framework that shows how you can use this JavaScript framework to create a custom sign-up form for new end users using JavaScript. Now, the Comet Server web interface, I said before, it's a single-page app. It uses the Comet Server API for its entire feature set. And there's this phrase called eating your own dog food. And it's a phrase from sort of product development that, it should be good enough to use internally. If you're willing to ask customers to use it, you should be able to eat your own dog food. And so by using the Comet Server API ourselves, it's one of the ways that we can ensure that our server API is stable, reliable, well tested, And so for many years now, our own web interface has been entirely developed using TypeScript, using a private internal version of this exact same SDK. And so we're very pleased to be able to release this work publicly, open source under the MIT license. And so this unlocks, productivity for Node.js, TypeScript, JavaScript programmers looking to integrate Comet Server more closely with your businesses. And this is my last slide for today. I hate to end on a down note, but maybe you can see the positive side in this one. So during the last Voyager cycle, we dropped support for Windows Vista, and of course that carries forward into 22.11 Ananke. And so your users must meet the new system requirements, which is Windows 7 or equivalent version of Windows Server to keep using the latest versions of Comet. Now, just to be 100% clear, Server 2008 is Vista Server, and that's no good. However, Server 2008 R2 is Windows 7 Server, and that is still fine. And some very ancient versions of macOS are also affected. So 10.11 is the new baseline supported version of macOS. Now we've run the numbers, we've looked at the breakdown of operating systems used generally and used by Comet partners today, and this simply should not be a problem. It's nearly 2023. Windows Vista is not widely used or relevant. And in fact, the time between removing this support early in the last Voyager cycle, the numbers have dropped off even more. This version of Windows Server still has some holdouts, however declining, however small. It's very hard to get security updates for it now, so it's starting to be dangerous to keep it running. But it is still out there. You might have customers with this version, and that's why we want to be clear that you do have options available to you. If you have end users running these operating systems, Vista, Server 2008 non-R2, you can either stay with 22.8 Comet release cycle. Of course, the 22.8 Comet series will still be able to support you in the tickets for a while. Otherwise, you can install the older 22.8 desktop app and use it along with an upgraded version of Comet Server. So it's perfectly fine to run an older client with a newer server. Of course, the best solution is to arrange for your end users to upgrade to Windows 7. Kind of funny thing to say. Upgrade to Windows 7, Server 2008 R2, macOS 10.11 or newer, and Comet works great on Linux too. So that's all I have for today. Sorry to end it on a down note. Are there any questions? Just to recap, I talked about the desktop app redesign, including the stunning new charts on the homepage overview, but also many other things in the desktop app like the wizards, duplicating protected items. I talked about streaming restores for MySQL and Microsoft SQL Server, Apple Silicon support for running Comet backup on the new M1 and M2 chips. You can now migrate a user between tenants, the feature voting system and how that led into our new integration with Gradient MSP to sync your users and job alerts into PSA apps like ConnectWise, Autotask, and all the rest. I talked about storage, the new decentralized cloud storage provider, very low cost, and it supports storage templates for automatically provisioning those private individual direct cloud storage vaults. I talked about the new JavaScript SDK for the API developers out there, and of course, no longer supporting Vista. So any questions? You can see there's one question here. Is it possible to change the database name during the restore process so we don't overwrite the existing database? We may need to recover specific rows or tables instead of replacing everything. With the options as present, no. However, what you can do for Microsoft SQL Server is restore it to a different instance. Just go into SQL Server Management Studio, create another instance, and restore into that instance instead, and then you'll be able to copy rows from one to the other. That's sort of an easy workaround. Another question, any update on a brandable portal for resellers that limits to branded storage, does not disclose provider? Right, I see what you mean, because when you're logged in as an administrator to a Comet server, even as a tenant administrator, you can see quite a lot of administrative settings, including the storage provider. I don't have an update for you today, but please make sure that you've upvoted the feature request on the feature request page, and we will continue to improve the support. I know we've got some plans coming up in the near future to work on the permission system for administrators related to Comet hosted, and perhaps this will make it as part of that project. Someone has just said, not a question, I just want to congratulate you guys for this wonderful job. Thank you, that's very kind, much appreciated. Thank you. I think that's probably all the questions we have time for today. Gone a little bit over time, but we still want to hear from you. If you have any questions at all, we're always happy to help out. We're more than happy to hear your questions by ticket through the usual ticket system at account.cometbackup.com, or you can email us, hello@cometbackup.com. Or do you know that we do support phone calls? So our company is based in New Zealand. We do have international support teams for round-the-clock level 1 technical support, but if you want a sales call or if you want any more advanced technical support or troubleshooting, we'll need to figure out a good time that suits both us in New Zealand and in your country. So just makes scheduling a little bit complicated with the time zones. But all you have to do is you go to the Comet website. At the bottom of the page, you click Contact Us, and then there's an option to schedule a phone call. There's a time zone widget, and it shows our available times, and it will work everything out for you. We're more than happy to jump on a call, and often that's a very quick way of clearing the air and getting answers to any questions you might have. So that's all from me. Hopefully you've managed to take away some useful information. Please check out the latest version of Comet, 22.11 Ananke. All users of the previous quarterly series, 22.8 Comet and earlier, you're encouraged to update, but we're happy for you to keep using older quarterly versions if you feel like it. Hope you're all keeping well and safe, and you can expect another webinar for the next quarterly release in 3 months' time. Cheers.